Hello and welcome to Conscious TV. I'm Iain McNay and today my guest is Karen Johnson. Hi Karen.
Hi.
And I've known Karen for about 20 years because she's a teacher and was co-founder of the Ridhwan School, also known as Diamond Approach, and that's a school that myself and Renata have been in for 20 years, and it's been very valuable in our own development, spiritual development. So we're going to talk a little bit about Karen's life and about the early days of the school and how she sees reality and lots of other things that I'm sure will come up during the course of our 55-minute adventure together. So when we were chatting recently and just in preparation for the interview, you were saying something significant happened when you were about 8 years old. You were reading a newspaper article about a girl who had died in an accident, and she said before she died to her mother, "Mummy, don't worry, I'm going to be okay." Mm-hmm. So how did that impact you at the time?
Well, actually, she said, "I know where I'm going," which really got my attention. Actually, my mother was reading the article out loud in our living room. We would sit around and read things, and she sat in her chair and she started to read this article, and I thought, how did she know where she was going? Mm. Where was she going? And I asked my mother, where was she going? And my mother said, I don't know, what do you think? And it caught my attention and I thought about it for weeks. Mm. And it just stimulated a whole intrigue with death and the fact that this girl was my age and she no longer existed. And it was my first conscious memory of actually being aware that there was another possibility or an invisible world somewhere that I didn't know.
And of course, a lot of kids, they do have their own fantasies of invisible friends and invisible worlds and having invisible friends. So this, in a way, was an expression of your longing, I suppose, for something that was bigger in life.
It was my first feeling of something being very mysterious. Mm. And I think children around that age start being aware of death and so on. As part of their socialization, they start to be conscious of the fact that relatives die and that kind of thing. This impact for me was that somebody my age was gone. Mm. Having grandparents die or uncles or other people, but not somebody my age. So it got me thinking, and it got me asking lots of questions to my mother.
Yes, and you had a very good relationship with your mother generally, didn't you?
I did, yes.
You could ask her things and she'd respond, and
I could ask her about anything, and I started to, at that point, ask lots of questions, and she didn't try to fill my mind with her answers. She had a lot of questions of her own also. She was seeking, searching. I didn't know at the time, but she became involved in studying and going to Esalen and doing workshops to bring out more realization for herself of who she was. Mm. So she didn't discourage me.
And then you also told me that at some point you started to see lights and energy fields, which was quite difficult for you at the time.
Well, I had always seen these halos around people. And when I went to school, it began to be problematic for me. And my mother noticed that I became more and more withdrawn. And I would ask her questions. Why do people have lights around them? It was disturbing sometimes when people would get angry or have feelings or lie in particular. That really got me, and I could see sparks flying or different things.
Really? You could, when someone lied, you
lying especially made them turn really icky colors. But I asked my mother, what was that? Why do people have lights around them? And I remember very distinctly, I must have been only up to her waist, so maybe I was 6 years old or something, looking up saying, "Mommy, why do people have lights around them?" And she said, she looked at me, she knelt down and looked into my eyes and said, "I don't know." Mm. But when she said it that way, I felt her openness. her concern, and her love for me all at once. And so we began a little journey together of being able to talk about the lights and talk about what that meant. And she helped me through that period of time because I felt like an outcast and like something was strange, something was wrong.
So looking back on it now, what do you think was going on then?
From what I know now, I know that many children have many different kinds of sensitivities, and they come about in different ways. I think people get very fascinated with paranormal kind of phenomena as an indication of realization. I don't share that belief. I think it can be, but I also think that it's something that, you know, people have brains that are capable of much more than we know, and there's all kinds of ways of perceiving reality and smelling it, tasting it, seeing it that is yet undiscovered. And I think children have some access to that, just as they have access to their nature and have all kinds of experiences that go away over time. So I don't know that I would say that it was a special gift or anything like that. I think it's a way that I was sensitive at this point. That seeing did go away at some point. I was relieved. I finally felt like I was part of the human race rather than a creature from some other planet.
Is that how you felt? You felt a bit like an alien?
I did. I felt like an alien.
Yeah.
And I've come to see that also many children feel that way, whether they have a special gift or not. Even if they're part of the in crowd, they feel alienated because that's not who they really are. So I think children often feel alienated. In fact, I've come to see in groups, many of my students feel that they are on the outside, they're peripheral, they're not part of the in crowd. So it seems to me it's a feature of humanity that people feel isolated from one another and from themselves.
And then one of the things that I understand that your mother encouraged you to do, which is quite remarkable, was at 14, when you were 14, she was running encounter groups for children, and you went along.
For teenagers. For
teenagers, yes.
Yeah.
But that was pretty far out stuff at the time.
Well, it was, but I grew up in Palo Alto, and that's where a lot of these new things, it was a melting pot of interesting new kinds of things, discoveries of all kinds and openings, and Esalen was nearby, and she and my stepfather often went to workshops there. She was a high school art teacher, she was the head of the fine arts, and she said these kids need somewhere to express themselves emotionally, not just in the arts, but to be able to learn how to relate to one another. So she started encounter groups.
And how was that for you, being in the encounter group there?
Scared the hell out of me. I was terrified. People were talking about feelings and getting angry at each other, and they were pretty raw at that point. But there was usually a facilitator that would stop people from hurting each other or saying things that were too nasty. But it did give me a chance to begin to learn how to put words to my feelings, which I did not have a lot of access to words to how I felt. So it was very instructive, and I think it was very important for me.
And another thing that you were telling me was that at one point, your stepfather, because your parents broke up and you then had a stepfather, you wouldn't talk to him at one point. You would just basically blanked him. And then he sat you down.
Blanked him is a good word for that. I just blanked him out, yeah.
Yeah. He sat you down and encouraged you to say what was really going on with you. And I think you said to him you hate him and everything, and that was quite a relief for you, wasn't it? You were able to actually be so honest with him.
It was. It was kind of an interesting moment. I was passing by him doing my usual blanking him out. He actually grabbed me by the shoulders, looked me straight in the eyes and said, "You can hate me, you can even send me to hell in your own mind, but you cannot treat me like that in my house. And I was sort of like, okay, he's giving me permission to hate him. What does that mean? And he said, so we're going to talk about it. And I said, no, we're not. And he said, yes, we are. Have a seat. And there was something in he was very firm, but I could also feel that there was some kind of care for me, that he was allowing me to have whatever feeling I had. And that started a discussion between us about my pain and my difficulty about my mother leaving and him being with her and that whole story. So it started me on a process of learning how to talk about very, very difficult things with someone I did not like. But I learned to respect him.
Yes.
And then I loved him.
Yeah, how wonderful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's often hard, isn't it, for teenagers in that situation to really say what they feel, because they don't feel they've got the permission to really say what they feel.
Yes. I also felt a need to tell him somehow. I didn't want to be in a house where that was happening either, really. So he kind of spoke to it. I think I secretly had hoped that he would.
Yeah.
So.
And he said to you, I wrote down from our conversation, that he listened to you and he said, I get it. Like he recognized that was your feeling and he accepted that was your feeling.
Yeah, when I said, I really do hate you.
Yeah.
He said, I can understand that. And that kind of stunned me, and then I realized how hurt I was. And that let me get in touch with the pain, and he was right there for it. And he stood there, you know, he sat with me, and actually, the chairs were very similar to these. They were these black leather chairs, and in the den. And so that's when I was opened up to a world of emotion and expression of that emotion, which was the beginning, I feel, of moving into my heart in a very particular way.
And then just to briefly finish the story at that time, you were then sharing a few years later an apartment with Sandra Maitre in America.
Yes.
And it was through that you first met Hameed Ali, wasn't it? Because they were friendly, Sandra and he. Yes,
they were in SAT together. And
so SAT was the Seekers After Truth, Claudio Naranjo's ongoing group. Yeah.
Yes. And I had chosen not to belong to the group. I had gone to some of the lectures and didn't feel the connection. But he came to pick Sandra up one night, and I'll never forget the sound of the crutch and then the placement of the foot. It sticks in my mind as the clunk down the hall. And then this very skinny young man with straggly black hair peeks around the corner, and I'm sitting on the floor, and I look up, and his grin was bigger than his body at the time. Big grin and an immediate, very friendly connection, and I could feel my heart was warm. And then I didn't see him again for a few years. But when I did, we had an immediate connect and started to chat a bit, and we haven't stopped chatting since. So it was very immediate, an immediate, friendly, warm feeling, and a very direct feeling of connection.
And how did you actually reconnect several years later?
Sandra and he were going to go off to Boulder, Colorado, to do what they called the process, which was an intensive process of opening up to emotions and dealing with father and mother. And they called it the returning process, returning to something more of yourself in some way. And so Sandra said, do you want to come along? And I had just broken up with my boyfriend, moved out. I had nothing to do, and I just felt an immediate, okay. So I went with them, and we lived together for a year while they engaged in this process. Hameed started a group after the process. he moved back to Berkeley, and I stayed on and moved to Denver with my boyfriend, and that started a whole process of the development of the teaching and of the school.
Okay, so I think a lot of people like me are interested in how the school actually started. So presumably it was an idea from Hameed, or was it something that you generally did together? What was the actual catalyst for the idea?
Well, first the teaching began, and
yes.
Hameed began to have experiences of presence. And he had many teachers, I had had many teachers, but this particular experience of the palpable sense of consciousness, conscious of itself, very palpable, luminous, fluid sense of something real, something true, beyond my ideas, beyond anything I could have imagined, started to arise in him in particular. And he would visit me in my home. And we would have these discussions about it, and finally I said, I get it kind of intuitively, but I don't quite get it. And this was the beginning of the teaching as we know it, which is how essence began to arise in experience, in his experience first. And the one night we were talking, and I kept saying, I think I could get it. I could feel some kind of excitement about it, but he held out his hand like this, and he swirled it like he was gathering some kind of invisible nectar. And he swirled it until his hand looked luminous, and he said, "Put your hand out." And I put my hand out. And he poured this substance into my hand. And I felt my hand getting warm. Then I felt it waking up, literally, like every cell felt awake, fluid and luminous. And then it began to pool and flow up my arm. And then it just filled my entire body until my whole body felt awake and alive, vibrant, and so purely what it was, beyond anything I could imagine. And I just felt love and gratitude, and I said, I got it. Now I know what you're talking about. And it was an actual way of transmitting that to me that began to be a more complete part of the conversation. So that's where the teaching actually began to take over in me.
Okay, now did that stay with you, that experience?
Yes, it never left.
It never left?
Never left. Well, it changed in terms of character, in terms of quality, in terms of how it presented itself, but it felt like pure, complete, luminous presence beyond my mind, beyond any emotion, beyond a physical sensation. But it was very close to a physical sensation. It just felt fluid and bright and luminous, but sometimes it would show up as strength, and sometimes it would show up as kindness, and love, awareness, and clarity. It began to put me through process of like feeling as though it would bang up against a wall and there'd be tensions that would show up. And I would say, God, what's happening to me? And I'd feel closed down. And then some issue would arise, and I'd work through it psychologically and get the understanding that way. And then it would be as if popping through that obstacle, and it would come out as another color, another substance, another quality. But it was as if that the power of it was showing up from within me and coming up against some kind of barrier saying, I'm coming through, you know, and then I would have to employ my consciousness, my attention, my interest in the truth to say, well, what is that that's showing up for me? And so it was up to me to be open and to open myself by understanding the barrier, and then it would just flood forward in whatever quality was showing up.
So it really was partly a very strong physical sensation.
Very strong, and it would bring emotions with it. At first, it was almost like you can think of the structures of our mind of who we believe we are, kind of begin to dampen us. Like as children, we're very open. You can watch a child grow and they get bones and more sturdy, but they also get more an exoskeleton too. And that's the part that isolates all of us from one another and from our nature. And we begin to take our ideas of ourselves and our history to be what's real. But that's all what dams up this brilliant, alive fluid that's our essential nature. And so it bangs up against these structures and calls attention to them. And by opening to them, seeing what they are and understanding, that can help kind of poke a hole in that dam and lets the fluids dissolve that layer or level of unconsciousness.
And was there an awareness of a process of changing in your brain and your thought structure at that time?
Yeah, it felt like it changed my life. Mm. And every time I felt it coming in a new way, I felt like, this is it, this is what I've wanted all my life. And then something else would arise, and I'd have some kind of a tension or a issue would come up, and I'd feel a longing for that luminousness again and in some other way, and then it would show up in a whole new way. So it was a constant, ongoing arriving over and over again.
So let's take some specific examples. So in a situation where you'd previously felt angry at somebody about something or a situation, how did the luminous presence that came up, essence, how did that then mean you reacted differently or responded differently to that situation?
Well, at first, I learned how to handle my emotions. Luckily, I'd had a lot of work before this time on, in fact, being in the encounter groups was one of the things that got me in touch first with emotions, how to handle them, what I didn't like in terms of how people expressed them and so on. But also in conversation with Hameed, one of the things that he taught me really is how to be with emotions, not act them out and not suppress them, really to be right with them. And so in being with anger, I learned how to feel the feeling. Mm. To be angry and then find out, what is this feeling? And actually allowed myself to be with it to the point where I could feel the energy of it. And it taught me how to be strong without being defensive. And then the fluid of strength began to fill me with its warmth, its beauty, its magnificence, and the aliveness of it. And then when a situation came up that called forth the strength, I could be strong in a way that was saying, you can't mess with me, but I can still feel my love for you.
So, so there was barriers there in one way.
That I could be strong and firm and say, this is not okay with me, without saying, screw you, get out of my face.
I understand.
It's more, it would come as an actual meeting of the situation with as much as what was needed, not more, not less, in a real way, meeting it truly.
You see, what interests me is always so let's call it essence. I think you used the word. Would you call this basic energy essence? Is that the right word to call it? What would you call it?
Well, it's more than energy, but it can be energy. I mean, I'm feeling as we're talking, I feel a lot of energy.
I can tell,
But I also feel the fullness of being. So it's a fullness a
being.
Palpable sense of a there-ness that's there, but so it has a physicality to it, an actual substantial characteristic, but I don't feel it just as physical. I feel it as part of the field that you and I are right now.
Yes.
I see it as part of what everything is, and I feel it as consciousness. It's conscious of itself beyond a mental take of consciousness. It's not just that I'm aware of it, it is awareness itself. And so that can arise in many qualities that we need for life, as compassion, as joy, as the ability to feel grounded in yourself, the ability to have strength, love, brilliance, precision. So it can arise as capacity for the individual.
Okay. I'm interested in the whole process, if it's the right word, but the whole way this is integrated in day-to-day living.
Mm-hmm.
So we have these different capacities that you mentioned, different aspects of essence. Mm-hmm. But how did you find that the mind structure was changing? Presumably you were aware that your mind structure was changing, and maybe it still changes now sometimes.
All the time.
Is it the kind of the force of this energy primarily, and the wisdom of that energy, or do you also find yourself having small realizations and understand this is not appropriate, and making decisions, so I won't do this anymore?
It's well, you brought up a lot of different things in that one statement. One is that there is this presence, but that doesn't necessarily make one wise. Wisdom is another step.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's the recognition that one is the presence, but being wise is a different level of development where one's functionality actually can arise in such a way where there's a sensitivity to the appropriateness of how one functions with another or within a situation. And at first, we make a lot of mistakes. In fact, when the red essence first arose, there is a lot of confusion, and often is in students, about what is that presence that's true and what is it to be angry. They get conflated. Just like with compassion, what's true compassion versus what is just helping somebody to not feel pain. And these are areas that become more and more clarified over time. And the more clarified they become and the more precise we are in understanding them, the wiser we can function as that. So appropriateness is something that develops as we become more and more capable of being attuned without having to be self-reflective, without having to say, oh, this isn't the right thing, this is the right thing. It's a spontaneous response of being our nature and responding to what's needed at the moment. And the more clear one is, the more the response will be appropriate, sensitive, clear to what is. And the more the quality will arise as needed.
So the appropriateness is emerging on its own, really.
Yeah.
When it comes down to it.
Right.
It kind of, you know, and I know for myself, if I overreact to situations, which I do sometimes, I kind of know I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. I'm watching myself doing it, but the pattern at that point is too strong and it's running. But there is a knowing there, and I think what you're talking about is, in my language anyway, is the knowing or the feeling is strong enough, embedded enough, mm-hmm. integrated enough to override or to so there isn't an inappropriate reaction to something.
Yes. Well, what you're talking about in being aware of your reactions and aware that something's not appropriate, that's the first step to waking up and noticing how one's behavior isn't really serving the situation.
Yes.
And when one feels the inclination to really want to be of service, really wanting to be real, to be authentic, then it behooves us to become aware of how we are being and to notice that edge. And over time, as we notice our structures are melting and changing and our minds are shifting, and that whole process of change is a change that allowing one to become more and more open to our nature taking over us, and we give as a gift our sense of what we have been and who we are, so that true nature can express itself, can hone us in a way that lets it express itself more perfectly through us.
Mm. It sounds so wonderfully simple and obvious when you say it, and it is in a way. And of course, the human journey is sometimes a journey which is not always smooth. And I think what interests me so much about what you were saying earlier is that when Hameed did his little trick and he was pouring the essence, that never left you, and that is, in a way, an instant awakening, isn't it? In one way.
In a way, it was. However, I don't mean to say that I never had difficulties.
No, I understand.
That's where the difficulties began, in a certain sense, becoming awake to the difficult human condition. Mm. And but it did spark the journey that I still feel that I am on. Mm. That I feel the journey continues, and there are days when something comes up where I encounter an obscuration for myself, something I haven't learned yet, something that I don't know about. And I can go from feeling free and complete and totally light for weeks, days, nobody there, just freedom is there. And then something can come and call my attention to the fact that something has started to get occluded, that something's showing up for me, that's showing me that there's something to learn here.
And what are the clues? How do you know that?
I don't feel the sense of freedom.
So you feel a restriction?
I feel restricted in some way or another.
Okay.
It might be just a slight fogginess or an actual sense of restriction, or I'll notice that my mind is running a certain pattern again, and I'll say, I wonder, where is that coming from? Who am I right now? I wasn't anybody 5 minutes ago, and now I feel like I'm something. Mm. What is that? So it's a matter of still, I'm interested, and feeling that this obscuration is not something to get rid of, it's another doorway. Mm. The difficulties are a doorway, they're a window to go into, not around.
Yes.
That I want to go into it. I want to know everything about it. I want to know about myself. I want to know about you. I want to know about my friend. I want to know what's there. I don't want to get somewhere about it. It could be a doorway to somewhere I don't know yet. Every single experience is a wormhole to the infinite.
And it's always an adventure.
Always. Yes. Whether it's a positive experience or a not so positive.
Yeah.
So even when I'm feeling like nothing's there, I feel nothing in 100 million different ways.
Mm. You feel nothing in 100 million different ways. Talk about that a bit. It's quite a statement.
People talk about emptiness. When I first heard about emptiness, I said, what does that mean? And I began to experience spaciousness. Oh, space. And that changed a lot of things about how I saw being open. I could feel openness itself. But then I realized that spaciousness and openness and this vast, it could be vast, not just, oh, I feel open here. Mm. But over time, that openness began to challenge boundaries. And then I realized, oh, I feel open beyond these boundaries. I feel infinite spaciousness. And then I felt like this infinite spaciousness was infinite love. Mm. And then I saw it as infinite presence. Everything is in a field of total, palpable presence, like I felt it crawling up my arm, but now it's crawling into everything as pure knowing, pure luminosity, pure brilliance, everything. Then I saw that that was just one way. Then there's pure beyond knowing, pure luminous awareness, not knowing anything, just being aware of everything, everywhere. Then there's beyond that, and every time is more and more empty of concepts, more and more empty of ideas, seeing that, oh, awareness is a concept. It's not a wrong concept, but still, there's the awareness without any idea of awareness. And I kept backing up, until I realized even the great mystery of being, the ground of all these dimensions, was just an idea that there's a ground somewhere. Mm. And then I realized I could fall through that too, to even more empty. So what began as a spaciousness and an openness, that openness continued to get so open that even open went away. Mm. So it's like wanting to know the truth of any experience, even when I felt I had arrived at the ground, opened the ground into a whole nother level of what does emptiness mean.
So what's the force that you feel coming through you when you talk like this? You're so alive and you're so dynamic. So talk about that, the actual force you feel in terms of...
It feels like the force of true nature itself wanting to know itself, wanting to continue to liberate itself from all of the boxes, all of the ideas. It's like, look at the flower, go into that flower, find out really what it is. What is it really?
These are wonderful flowers, Amsterdam tulips, and they're special
and
ones.
If you look at it long, you can become it. You know it by being it. Yeah. Like anything is an entrance into itself. It's like I feel this force of aliveness, adventure, and at the beginning it shows up as the desire to be true, to be real, to be authentic. It's like the drive that's in everyone that makes them long for what they are, to long for the reality that we know is there because we love it. And this force has a love to it, has an intelligence to it, and has a way of knocking on the door that says, just follow me. Wherever you are, you don't have to jump over it. Just open to it. If you're sad, find out what it means. If you're happy, find out what that really, really is. Don't jump over that to know me. I'm in that. It says, I'm right there, bursting with everything you ever wanted to know. All you have to do is look at right where you are. And if you look, know, see, feel right where you are, that opens itself up just like the flower. It is what it is, and it knows how to flower. Human beings don't know how to flower. So we need to catch the nectar from someone else that knows how to flower. Mm. We
catching the nectar, which is what happened to you.
We catch the nectar,
yeah.
And it helped me bloom.
Yeah.
And it caught me off guard. I had no idea. And that nectar's still coming through, but it's coming through as this force now.
Yes, and that's always an interesting thing, because on the spiritual path we have an idea of what freedom is, or being more free is, or more enlightened is. Yeah. And of course you read stories and you hear people like you, it's the off-guard moment when something can really get through and change, because there's a limitation in the way that we feel that freedom is going to happen, occur, or what it's going to be like.
Right. What I love about the process that it did to me, basically, was a continual challenge. It's flowing, it's moving, it's coming. And if I got off onto something else, I wasn't happy. I had to continually come back, realign with it.
So it registered straight away. You weren't happy. So again, you felt this restriction, constriction.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah.
And it challenged the way I was trying to live, the way I was trying to do things, the way I was oriented, and it just kept turning me around, saying, you got to listen to me. Just like my stepfather, this is my house. Sit down and listen to me.
Yes.
This force continually is doing that. And that's the force that's in every human being. And it's there, just needs to be listened to. It's knocking on the door all the time.
So how is meditation for you? Because meditation is a tool that we use quite a lot in the Ridhwan, in school, in the Diamond approach. Is that something that's developing for you as a tool? And
well, it always was. As you can tell, I'm an energetic sort. Meditation was always difficult.
Oh, really?
Always difficult for me. Yeah. Students, I tell them it was hard for me, which made me have to do it. Even more. I had to really make myself do it. Because inquiry is our main practice, to really see where we are and inquire.
Let's talk a little bit, because we haven't even mentioned inquiry. Let's just talk very briefly about how you understand and how you use inquiry.
But I do want to say to people who have trouble with meditation, that's when you need to do it anyway. Hameed said to me, you're great at being in touch. You can feel things. It's moving in you.
Yeah.
You need to meditate. So I did.
Okay.
Anyway, the inquiry that we do, meditation assists in our inquiry by helping us settle, helping the mind open, giving us focus. We have many different levels of meditation that we go through, that we give people at different stages of their work. And it's to assist in bringing about a refinement of the vehicle, of our individual consciousness, to be able to be more open. And that empowers our inquiry. By allowing our minds to settle, our mind can be more open to new possibilities. And we can learn to hone the mind in a way that brings out its natural intelligence and can help it to be more clear, more specific. And that capacity of mind to have discerning, it's a very discerning instrument on any level. Inquiry doesn't need enlightened mind, but it can lead to that because we use the discerning faculty to discriminate experience.
So we start in inquiry, start with experience, that's what's going on now.
Yeah, so we feel it.
Investigate more, understand the experience through the feeling in the body. We feel the body. Talk us through it. People that are watching this that don't know anything about the Ridhwan School or inquiry, just talk us through how it works, the stages.
Well, we feel often it starts at the beginning with dealing with a lot of psychological things because that's what's obscuring most people at the beginning. And they often come with a longing to understand themselves, but also to go beyond just the psychological. They want to know spirit. They want to know reality. They want to know what's true. They want to know their potential. But often the obscurations present themselves as various issues, difficulties, sadness, anger, reactivity. And so we start off with wherever you are. If you're sad, you feel into what's that like to be sad? You feel the feeling, you can sense it. Often people point to their heart when they're sad. Okay, well, what does it feel like in you to feel sad? And often people will feel some kind of sensitivity or even a pain or like a wound there. And you stay with it, and sometimes that can bring in history, your ideas about things, about something didn't go a certain way or someone treated you a certain way, and that can come out as you stay with the sensation of the sadness. And sometimes that can, so the inquiry is really, you discern by feeling into it, by finding out, well, what does it mean that I'm sad that someone did that? And asking the questions, letting yourself not know where it's going to go, but really wanting to know the truth. And discriminating the sensation, the different kinds of emotions that can come. The sadness might lead to pain. Pain is a discrimination there. It's not the same thing as sadness. And that pain can, if you really feel it and discriminate the sensation, that can feel like it starts to open up a little bit. And that openness, that's another discrimination. It can lead to a possibility of feeling something. The pain can lead to an openness and a sensitivity, and can bring some compassion for oneself. And that compassion, if you really let yourself feel it, not just, oh good, I feel nice now. Well, what's that feeling? Oh, it's a sensitive presence there that feels sensitive, and I feel touched by it, and it's delicate and tender. And it helps me to tolerate that pain. So you see, the inquiry is really using your discernment with your emotions, with your sensations. It brings in the totality of what a human being has at their disposal at any given time.
And it's bringing understanding of the experience.
And it brings understanding the experience, yes.
Which I know
but
for
not
myself
just a mental understanding. It's being as close and as intimate to experience as possible, and letting the mind find its real place. To discriminate, to know, and to assist the heart in opening, not to close it down. So using mind to help heart, and heart helping mind by feeling the love to know the truth. So these two are a real, you might say, sacred marriage.
Again, the love to know the truth.
Love to know the truth takes mind and heart together as a collaborative, it's a dance. They're great dancing partners, and they teach each other how to work, how to function better, and refine them.
I want to go back to meditation, because we skipped off that to go to inquiry, because
that's our main practice, is the inquiry.
Yes, I understand that, but I think there's a lot of people like you that find meditation hard, and I wonder what, you know, kind of encouragement, I'm going to say tips, but encouragement you can give them. You're saying you found it difficult, but you stayed with it. What were the tools that you used to really stay with it?
First, I listened to the person that told me I needed it.
Okay, which was Hameed.
Hameed, and we were best friends, but also I recognized at some point he was my teacher. And that relationship changed over time until it became much more mutual. But when I heard him say, you need to do this, which was rare, I listened. So I did it. And the obstacle for me was setting aside the time. I'm a doer. I like doing things. I like exercising. I like dancing. I like doing stuff. I'm a mover and a shaker.
I can see that.
That's just what I do. So to sit, to spend the time with myself sitting, not doing anything, was the first part of the practice. And sometimes I sat there going, okay, I'm making my list in my head of all the things to do. No, come back, come back. And it took a great deal of will for me to sit there. That in itself was a very important part of the practice. The next thing was to actually be able to land, get quiet. Once that began to happen for me, I began to look forward to that intimacy with myself, to just be without having to do anything, to just be able to be, to open, to feel my mind quiet, to feel the peacefulness. I'd felt peacefulness before, but it was always in my, what I called my moving meditations, my hiking, my this, and then I realized this has value on its own, to get in touch with that presence of peace the emptiness, the quietness, not only not having to be anything, but not having to do anything, and saw that my compulsion to do was problematic for me. It began to highlight things about me that my doing kind of cloaked. So it gave me a deeper ability to see the areas of my mind that couldn't be exposed by my moving meditations. And that became more and more refinement, and it empowered the inquiry in a way that just inquiry on its own doesn't have the same pizzazz.
I like the words you used to describe it, intimacy with myself.
Yeah.
I feel that, yes, how can I have intimacy with myself? How can I have intimacy with the other if I haven't got intimacy with myself?
Yeah.
It's very true, isn't it?
It is.
And a lot of people struggle with intimacy with themselves. And they wonder then why they don't have intimacy with the other.
Yeah, they very often try to get it through what we think of as intimacy, which means being in an intimate situation.
Yes.
Rather than feeling
Yes.
the intimacy with one's nature, with oneself. And that can be expressed then personally. I mean, I feel that with you now as we're talking about it, that there's a softness and a heartfulness.
And it becomes a meeting.
Yeah.
That to me is often the meeting, the level of the meeting is intimacy at times, yeah.
Yeah, and that can be even more than a meeting. The intimacy can actually feel like a unity.
Yes.
Where we share the same heart.
Yes.
And that can even go beyond sharing, where there's no distance between us at all.
The oneness is flowering.
Yeah.
We have about 3 minutes left.
Ah.
I'd like to hand that time to you and just do what you like with the last 3 minutes.
Time is non-existent.
except to the TV studio.
Yes. It's interesting. As we talk about the intimacy and the way that I feel our heart is simply a flower at the moment. It goes beyond time, beyond space. And that's the real freedom, is not to be caught in time and space. That in the human condition we can be in suffering. We have physical ailments. There's emotional suffering. But we can also learn that there's something far, far beyond that. And we can be free within those conditions of suffering. And that is real freedom. We don't have to be in any particular condition, but we can also know the beauty of what it means to really be with another authentically and truly.
Yes.
And that's the beauty of being human, is that we get to know that.
Yes. Yeah, you just reminded me that we've done some interviews on Conscious TV with people that have been in prison and how they've found in prison unbelievably freedom, incredible freedom.
Yeah.
And that's right. You can almost be anywhere, in any situation.
And be free.
Free.
Even within one's own suffering.
Yeah.
That dynamism is still there, saying, know me. In any way I show myself, know me.
Okay, that's a pretty good place to finish. Karen, I really appreciate you coming along and chatting with us on Conscious TV.
It's beautiful to be here.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for watching Conscious TV again. And I really hope we do see you again soon. Goodbye.